And we are back with more on News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petronas Show. Well, it's part of the Great Reset. So they say you will own nothing but be happy about it. Is this another tantalizing hint into where the Trudeau government is headed? A statement by Justice Minister David Lametti. He was referring to the fact that the government intends to go after Russian assets, of course, related to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Other countries have done it, seized the belongings, yachts belonging to Russian oligarchs, all well and good. But it was a statement that Lametti said that, well, raised some eyebrows during a scrum. He said that property rights are not absolute, meaning your rights to property are not absolute. Not the fact that, yeah, we're going to target the rights of foreigners engaged in bad activities. We're going to target somebody else. No, he said your property rights are not absolute in Canada. Technically, he's right. And is there a loophole here? Is there room to go after people's private property? I mean, we know that this prime minister has Marxist leanings. We know he's a globalist. We know he doesn't want you to own anything because he sees private property as something that's reserved for the elites, people like himself, people who are important, not serfs like you and me. And I wanted to bring in Cosmin Georgia, who does terrific work with TNC.News True North. And I wanted to play this clip for him. Welcome to the show, Cosmin.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Happy to be here.
I want to play this clip by David Lametti. He said it. I mean, some people will see this as fairly innocuous. The idea that the government can go after people's private property and that there's really nothing that anybody can do about it. But I can't help but think that it maybe makes a broader statement about these people and how they feel about property in general. You heard the clip. What did you think of it?
I was surprised well, maybe not surprised, but the fact that no media there, no journalists challenged him or asked him to clarify on exactly what he meant by that statement and whether it applies to Canadians is very telling, and it paints a broader picture about the state of our media, which is willing to accept anything the government says. So I think it's true that the Trudeau government has shown a pattern of not respecting rights, especially property rights. I mean, we saw during the Freedom Convoy how they froze the assets of demonstrators and their supporters. We saw how they towed trucks away and seized them and kept them. And plenty of people have had difficulty getting their property back. So it's no secret that Trudeau has trampled on rights in this country.
Yeah. Do you think that people should be alarmed? Because, I mean, Ezra Levant tweeted this: every day Canada becomes more like Cuba. And I don't know. I don't want to make too much of the statement that Lametti said, because there's always the possibility that maybe he wasn't talking about Canadians, but it was just how he said it that maybe raised some eyebrows. So let's listen a little bit to David Lametti in this scrum.
Minister Lametti, I want to ask you about C-19 and the idea of seizing and selling off Russian assets. The idea that some observers say that is on shaky legal ground. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, we'll obviously tailor the provisions so that it could withstand a court challenge. You don't have an absolute right to own private property in Canada. There are steps that are taken when expropriations happen at whatever level of government, and we'll be sure to stay within those boundaries.
Let's not forget that these people see climate change as an emergency. And so wouldn't that potentially give them the pretext to come after other people's property, landowners, and say, look, we're in the midst of an emergency. Therefore, private ownership is bad. It runs counter to our aims to reduce people's carbon footprint. And so isn't it quite possible that they will use that as a pretext eventually to come up after people's land?
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with hypotheticals here, but like I said, there's a trend in this government, and it's funny because you asked, are the liberals being more like Cuba? We see a common pattern with this government and its ministers. For example, I think it was last year you had former heritage minister Stephen Guilbeault saying that they will require licenses for anyone to practice in the media in this country or to be a journalist or reporter. Now, some of the most authoritarian and dictatorial countries in the world require media licenses. So I think that's a valid point, right? We have a prime minister who's partnered with the chief socialist party, Jagmeet Singh, who literally said today that he wants to redistribute corporate profits. The redistribution has been spoken about by liberal officials. So it is very concerning when they start using this language, which is Marxist language. It's language that came out of a communist ideology, and redistribution of property essentially implies forced government redistribution.
Right. And how about the globalist aims to redistribute? I mean, isn't that part of Build Back Better? Essentially, to confiscate property, to make sure that people don't own land because it's not sustainable. Isn't that one of the things that's considered not part of the future? You know, private ownership. We saw what they did to private, well, to business owners. We saw what the pandemic was used for in terms of shutting down thousands of small businesses while keeping profits on the corporations, right? The Walmarts of the world and Amazons of the world, they all did extremely well. The people who suffered were the small business people, small shops, stores, and a lot of them were forced out of business, told that they couldn't continue to operate while people just went to Home Depot all they wanted. And so that tends to support the idea that the government wants all the wealth, all the business essentially concentrated in the hands of a very few, and basically to push out small business. And at the end of the day, I think home ownership kind of fits into that same kind of view, which is if you can be a small business person, well, you could also own you can own your own home. This has always been the dream in a free market society. And when you weigh that with the radical views of this prime minister who worships at the feet of communist China, well, it starts to lend itself more and more, I think, to the idea that maybe these guys don't really believe that you should have property, that Canadians by and large should have access to home ownership, property ownership. And then you have a justice minister who says, well, you don't have any guarantees. We don't have any absolute. It was like one of these things that was always at his fingertips. You know what I mean? When he responded to this question, it was like right there, the idea that Canadians, that nobody in Canada has rights of property, absolute property ownership, meaning they can do anything. And these people have also shown an inclination to use the idea of emergencies to push through whatever radical measures they want to push through. I mean, they use the convoy as a pretext to bring about impose the Emergencies Act as draconian a measure as you can imagine. They had lockdowns. They seized people's assets. I mean, they don't have respect for people's bodily autonomy, right? Thousands of people were fired because they refused to take the shots. And so, how can you believe that a government respects private property when they don't even respect your right to your own body? Do you know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this stuff about property, it's all and with like international organizations like the World Economic Forum, it's couched in these technical terms. They call it stakeholder capitalism, etc. And this is a way to sort of make it new and fresh and take attention away from the principles that these ideas are based on. And we have a prime minister who has openly expressed his admiration for China's basic dictatorship, as he calls it. So I think it is all definitely concerning. There are so many hints and things that the government does that indicate this move towards more centralization, more government involvement in people's lives. And it's funny to think that Justin Trudeau's father was the one who said that we need to get the government out of people's bedrooms, when his son has gotten the government into people's bodies, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So,
I want to run past a couple of stories that you've been working on. Canada's COVID rules, stringent and invasive. This is the European Union, a report by that organization. Just going to read part of the story here in tnc.news. A healthcare law reviewed, submitted to the European Parliament in May, took aim at the Canadian government for having some of the strictest COVID-19 restrictions in the world. The report, Right to Health, a comparative law perspective, Canada, published by the European Parliament Research Service and authored by McGill University Law professor Dr. Derek Jones, was a survey of the country's legal system as it pertains to healthcare rights. The EU has published similar reports about other countries. The quote in the story is, many stringent and invasive public health measures for the COVID pandemic, curfews, capacity restrictions in restaurants, the closure of bars, nightclubs for months, locking of office buildings, stoppage, and restrictions of international travel have severely curtailed or arrested commercial trade in vital sections of Canada's economy, the report said. What do you make of this?
right. So I think it's very interesting, the fact that this report was submitted to the European Parliament. It is a review that is meant to help the European Parliament in its decision making. So they're going to use this for future policy, etc. But we're seeing an increasing trend of negative international attention on Canada, and particularly its pandemic response. That report goes on to mention how Canada has the strictest restrictions in the world, particularly related to unvaccinated Canadians, not being able to board a plane or a train domestically and internationally. And of course, this has had so many downstream impacts economically via the supply chain and much more. So I think it's good that there's growing attention to what Trudeau is doing to this country and how he's locked up citizens within the borders of Canada. But I don't think it's enough. I think there needs to be a lot more people speaking out against this internationally and domestically. And I think he needs to see the pressure mount until he gives way on what are totally arbitrary and unjustified mandates.
Yeah, here's a message by CH. They're seriously considering mandating more shots when there were more Pfizer documents dropped yesterday that were horrifying. Yeah, I mean, the mainstream media has done precious little to cover these 55,000 documents, to my knowledge, so far that have been released. People like Naomi Wolf have done a terrific job, thanks to thousands of volunteers poring over these documents and deciphering them, because some of that is very technical language and medical language. But some of the stuff that's coming out is particularly around the impacts on mothers and pregnant women is horrific. And a lot of this information did not come out. It was hidden. And so, to your point, isn't it possible that these mandates that they have imposed are really about bringing more shots in? These people, we just saw a recent report, CTV doing a story. Clearly, it looked like something that was done at the behest of government. Here, put this out, looking at the need to impose more shots, like a booster. Because right now, in order to qualify as fully vaccinated, all you need is 2 shots. But they're saying, no, you need a 3rd shot. So if it hasn't worked, first shot, second shot, well, maybe 3rd shot, lucky. Is that what's going on here? Are they pointing towards imposing a 3rd shot? Because if they are, they can't lift these mandates, because the mandates are really what force people, put people in the position of feeling bullied and coerced into doing something they might not otherwise do. What say you?
Well, look, on the question of whether these mandates are today effective in convincing people to get vaccinated, I think it's been over a year now. I believe it was November 2021 when the travel mandates were instituted. I don't think people who are unvaccinated today are gonna get the shot. I think that's we've already passed that point. They're not convinced the mandate. They're willing to live with the mandates, and we're talking about millions of people here. So the media has actually been at the forefront of pushing vaccination, as we've seen. You know, they've the Toronto Star branded unvaccinated people as unacceptable on their front page. You know, they've relied on so-called experts who are actually on the payroll of Pfizer and different vaccine producing companies. So I don't think the mandates are going to be effective in causing people to get the vaccine, to get a third booster shot. I just think at this point it is totally punishment. It is totally a vendetta against the by the government who sees the unvaccinated as an unacceptable portion, a portion of the population that is not willing to go along with its plans.
Cosmin Georgia joining us on Saga 960. Yeah, there's so much there to unpack. You're absolutely right. I mean, you look at the way the government has been treating this. Well, we don't know if she's unvaccinated or not. I mean, she's just not revealing her status. This is the Conservative member of Parliament in Saskatchewan, who is not even being allowed in the building. I mean, she's being treated like a pariah. This is an elected representative. She deserves to be allowed in the House to be representing those who voted for her. She got something in the neighborhood of 70% of the vote in her riding. So this is a lady who really should be doing her job, but she's being prevented from doing so simply because she decided that she didn't want to reveal what really is nobody's business but her own. You also made the point earlier, Cosmin, about how there is growing opposition to Justin Trudeau's measures in Canada. You have this story as well: freezing convoy bank accounts, a chilling abuse of power. This, according to an Irish senator. Independent Irish Senator Sharon Keegan pointed to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's use of the Emergencies Act to freeze the assets of Freedom Convoy protesters and their supporters as a stark abuse of government power. Ireland, on a number of occasions, has raised the issue of abuse of power. Talk about this. I mean, why do you think back? We know that there's that German member of the European Parliament who has spoken out eloquently and forcefully about Justin Trudeau's abuse of power. But we've seen a number of cases where the Irish have been particularly concerned.
I think, well, most of the, just to be clear, all of the concern from Ireland has been coming from this senator. She's actually spoken on 3 occasions at least against Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's use of the Emergencies Act. And now she's talking about also about the mandates. She recently, in I think it was in April, read out a letter from an Irish citizen explaining how they feel locked up in Canada because they're unvaccinated, they can't travel domestically, etc. So we're seeing a growing number of people abroad speaking out against our prime minister, something that has not happened before in my recollection, right? We never saw international figures, politicians, media outlets, etc., condemning Stephen Harper. I don't recall that happening. So I think it's important for Canadians to realize that the Canada's reputation under this government is going into the gutter. It's being flushed down the toilet. We are no longer seen the way we were seen before. And this is a perfect example, and she's totally correct. This is the freezing of the accounts is a chilling abuse of government power. Everything they do, like banning that Conservative MP from entering the House of Commons, is also a chilling abuse of government power. All the government power that they have, they seem to abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we have the state of Ohio passing a measure calling on the federal government, their federal government, the United States, the Biden administration, to label America, to label Canada as an abuser of religious freedoms. That's another story that came out recently. And just another sign that maybe more and more countries are viewing Canada as a place where maybe one day people may be applying for asylum, actually political asylum, and not being laughed off at all. Here's a story that's really been taken off, and you know about this. Canadian airport's biggest disgrace known to man. The former NHLer said that in a viral video. The story is a couple of days old, but this former Pittsburgh Penguins defenseman, Ryan Whitney, continues to get a ton of play, trashing the chaos at Toronto Pearson Airport after being left stranded by Air Canada while waiting for a flight to Buffalo. This guy's video is everywhere, Cosman. Let's listen a little bit to what Ryan had to say. I don't know. Can you hear that?
It doesn't seem to be coming through on my end.
Yeah, I'm going to fix that in a minute. But you heard the video. We've all heard the video, and I'm going to play it. I'm going to play it in a second. This guy's upset, but the fact that this video got so much play, I mean, everybody in the world now knows that the Pearson is a disaster area. And you have to wonder, why isn't the government responding? Why aren't they taking the kind of steps that everybody thinks that they should take? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right. The government is being totally stubborn because you have multiple airline organizations in Canada and abroad telling the government what to do, and that is drop the restrictions. And they're refusing to do that. And it's causing a huge mess at airports across Canada, particularly major ones like those in Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. And this, people should realize that, flight delays at one airport actually impact the entire system. It's not like it is just isolated to Toronto. This is going to cause problems everywhere. And this is a perfect case with Ryan here, where he explains his troubles. And I think a lot of people needed that human aspect of somebody telling them, look, this is what's going on. We have 600 people lineups, maybe 2 Air Canada representatives here dealing with this. The transport minister, Omar, has not said anything, has not promised to do anything about this. He's bringing in more people, but this is ridiculous because they already fired federal airport staff through the federal mandate who were unvaccinated. So they've caused this mess. It's total mismanagement. It is totally the Ottawa government's to own, as the former Air Canada chief operating officer said today on Twitter. This is their mess, and they caused it, and they need to do something immediately to fix it.
Let's play it again, see if you can hear it now.
Hey guys, Whit here. I don't even really know what to explain. So for people telling me to drive, I can't drive. They have my bags. They won't give them back. So I had Edmonton to Toronto yesterday. I landed around 3. I then had Toronto to Boston at 8:30. Customs was about 3 hours. Got through. Flight canceled from Toronto to Boston. All right. At this point, now I go and I see there is a 400-person line with 2 Air Canada workers. There's a million canceled flights. Everyone's just panicking. So I waited in that line about 6 hours. At near the end of the line, by the way, you know how much my feet hurt? Near the end of the line, they closed it. They just said, oh, you have to go somewhere else. We had to re-enter Canada. We had to go through Canadian customs. So by the time I finally see someone from Air Canada, it's 1 a.m. I said, can I just get my bags? I had a ride to Buffalo all set up, and I had a JetBlue flight from Buffalo. I just need to get out of this country, out of this airport. This is the worst airport on earth. I'm telling you, there's no other airport like this. So they say, no, you can't have your bags. Your bags are already like in the middle of no man's land. You can't have your bags. So we have a 8:50 flight for you from Toronto to Boston for this morning. This is at 1 a.m. Okay, I'd be here at 5 a.m., they said. So I got here at 4:55. I wanted to be 5 minutes early. So I wanted to be 3 hours and 55 minutes early. I get here, this woman says, "Oh, we booked you actually on a flight from here to Montreal and then Montreal to Boston, but that leaves in 50 minutes and you can't make it." They never sent me an email. They just, I started laughing. I mean, what are you gonna do? It was either that or like cry.
I actually admire his restraint, Cosman. I mean, he could have freaked. He could have went ballistic, but he didn't. And I think that makes his testimony all the more powerful. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. I've got two little kids, a 3-year-old and a little infant. So if you have kids, I couldn't imagine, waiting 6 hours more than a day just to get on a plane to go home. It's incredibly frustrating, and I think travelers are experiencing the short end of the stick. And the government needs to act. They need to remove the mandates, and they need to clear up these backlogs and these delays. And I think we might see like the U.S. State Department or the Travel Authority in the United States say something about this, because clearly it's also impacting citizens from other parts of the world.
Oh, you think that there might be some kind of retribution against Canada if they continue to be out of step with other countries as far as these mandates are concerned?
I'm not sure retribution, but I think, if it's impacting US travelers, I think there needs to be a conversation between the American authorities and the Canadian authorities to tell them, get your stuff together, fix this problem, because as I said before, the air travel system it's all interconnected. Delays at one airport will impact another airport, and it's just going to cause problems everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another story. Canada's COVID rules stringent and invasive. I think we looked at this one. Again, the EU and this report slamming Canada. But do you think Justin Trudeau cares about any of this stuff? It just seems to be water off a duck's back. And I don't know if I'm misinterpreting this guy, whether he's, being a drama teacher, he's able to put this idea out that he doesn't really care, or it's just another day in the neighborhood. But it strikes me that somehow, who cares? I don't know. What do you think? Am I missing something here?
So I think with Justin Trudeau, considering his narcissistic characteristics, I don't think it particularly impacts him. But I think Canadians at large need to be aware of what other people are saying about Canada's reputation. And the fact is, we have a prime minister who just goes on and continues one course. As I said, they're totally stubborn. So the point of bringing attention to this international condemnations and these citations and reports is actually to wake up Canadians, because a lot of people in this country are presented a very one-directional view of our government, because they're in this insulated media economy where they're only reading or watching CBC, Global News, CTV, who totally ignore this stuff. You never heard from the mainstream media about this report, even though it's quite significant. So I just think the point is people need to wake up, smell the coffee, and realize what this government is doing, how they're perceived. And yeah, I think that's the most important thing. Whether Trudeau is offended by it or personally hurt, it doesn't really matter. The point is he needs to be not like he needs to be removed from office because of what he's doing. Yeah.
Whether or not that'll happen or not anytime soon, it's hard to see.
I think we look at the results of the Ontario election, the NDP and the Ontario Liberals got totally clobbered, and I think that's a good sign. And I would like to see that repeated in the upcoming Alberta election. If we see the NDP losing in what is actually a winnable election, I think it'll indicate to the federal parties that Canadians' attitudes are shifting. A future election, I mean, we have 3 years, will not go their way. Either they have to change course, or they're going to continue barreling to this country towards destruction, and they'll get the boot.
Yeah, absolutely. This comment by CH it's really starting to look like he is intentionally tanking the economy and bankrupting the nation. I've made that case on the Mark Petroni show many times. I think it's on purpose. People say, "Oh no, it's just he's incompetent or he's just not very bright." No, I think this has gone well beyond that point. I think he's doing things intentionally to wreck the country. But that's my take on it. What are you working on right now? What can our readers of TNC News look forward to from you?
Well, I think we're sticking to trying to hold the government accountable for their mandates. We're looking at the economy, the supply chain, and any sort of political stories that come out of that, especially the conservative leadership race as well. So, yeah, you're free to check us out at True North or follow me at Cosmin DZS on Twitter.
All right, Cosmin, thank you so much for coming on the Mark Petroni show on Saga 960. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be here.
All right. We're going to take a brief timeout, commercial break, back with more on News Talk Saga 960 and the Mark Petroni show after this.